this first ever Zoom Lunch and Learn. As a member of the Membership and Emerging Leader Committee, I did want to let you know that the MEL Committee's objective is to prepare and mentor the next generation of commercial property owners, portfolio and property managers, and building engineers, as well as administrative positions. We do this by providing resources, mentorship, and networking opportunities to professionals with less than 6 years experience in the commercial real estate industry. We have scholarship opportunities available each year that any one of us would be happy to provide more information to you on. Also, as a reminder for today's event, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand or use the chat feature, and that this event is being recorded. I also want to give a big thanks out to RSI Roofing for sponsoring this event. And with that, I'll turn it over to Melanie with RSI for a few words.
Hey everybody, my name is Melanie Bomba Malinkovich, and I'm actually one of the owners at RSI Roofing. I'm going to keep this very short and brief. We just wanted to let you all know that we provide commercial roofing, roof maintenance, and emergency leak calls. In this bright, beautiful blue sky weather, I'm sure that is top of mind for everyone. But with that said, I'll turn it back over. Just wanted to let everyone know Audrey will be emailing out a $10 gift card for Uber Eats, which if you're like me, you love a little bit of restaurant action right now. So please enjoy and great luck. Good luck with the seminar.
Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth Meyer. I'm an assistant property manager with CBRE Incorporated. We personally handle, my team, 5 properties from Vista to Chula Vista. We have mostly industrial properties and a single office building. The focus today on the call is problem solving with service providers, so I thought we'd share a couple of scenarios, or at least one from us, that presented an issue. I call it elevator down and out. We had a 2-story office building in the heart of Rancho Bernardo, and the only working elevator, or rather the only elevator in the building, went down right after Christmas. Thankfully, there wasn't a lot of activity in the building. However, in the coming days, everyone would be returning from vacations, and it was pertinent that we got it back up. We had immediately contacted our contracted service provider, and they had advised us to follow a new process that they were implementing, which was to call a service phone number and report the item. So we did that. And we're told that we would be contacted as soon as someone was going to be available to service the machine. Well, a day goes by, 2 days, we follow up. We're promised that service would occur and that it's even scheduled. We're provided with a date, but it comes and goes with no correspondence. And despite several emails, phone calls, voicemails, contacting different contacts for the service provider, we were not satisfied, and tenants of the building began to complain. A few people had even injured themselves over the holidays and could not use the stairs. So we were in dire straits. Fast forward, it took 2.5 months for this item to be addressed, which is completely unacceptable. During this time, the next door building on the property, a 3-story, one of its elevators went down. It was only after the threat of contacting another service provider that these issues were addressed. So what do you learn from this situation? I was fairly new at the time. I was scared to go outside of our contract. I thought I would be in breach of contract if I contacted another service provider. Very green of me. Well, it turns out that we learned it's best to have a secondary service provider as a backup, a trusted source, if you will. And it was certainly a learning curve for me, new to the business. Has anyone else experienced anything else like this? You ever have a non-responsive or unresponsive vendor or service provider that you thought you could rely on? Thankfully, it hasn't happened to us again thus far. Knock on wood.
I kind of had that happen when I first started with CBRE and reached out to a whole bunch of people. I'm like, okay, what do I do? I was in the same situation, and they're like, contact another vendor and keep contacting until you can just, you know, get it taken care of. And that's what we did. We found somebody and started a contract with them so that way we could get them on the property and got it all taken care of. But yeah, it's not a fun situation.
It really felt like our backs were to the wall.
Yeah.
You shouldn't feel like that with a service provider.
No.
Yeah, Elizabeth, we've run into that before too, where vendors are non-responsive or they're really busy. And sometimes you just need to know that if they can't handle the volume of work, then you have to move on. You need to find somebody else. So like you said, when you're newer, you don't always know those things and you might be afraid to call a new vendor, but ask, take those chances. It's very important.
Anyone else questions?
Oh, sorry about that. I've noticed that other property managers are great resources. If something where your normal vendor just can't handle the load, they're super busy, and you need to find somebody else. Reaching out to a fellow property manager and seeing like, hey, who do you use? Who do you recommend? Has been very helpful.
I agree. I've since gotten very used to reaching out to my peers, especially those above me who have just that much more experience. You know, just to check in. Am I doing the right thing? Am I following the right procedures in this instance? And it really has added to my education in the business. More so than classes and courses, I think, is just learning from my peers.
Yeah, your fellow BOMA members are a great resource too. I've learned so much from the other property managers, and really they come from BOMA. I mean, that's where I've made most of my connections. So another really great pool of people to have is not just the vendors, but fellow property managers. So good point, Bree.
I had a quick comment or question. So it's getting back to kind of that conflict where they weren't responding. Did you know people up in the chain of the company you were working with to go to and to tell them there was no action, or you had already gone through that channel?
Yeah, we did. And sadly, they were almost as unresponsive. It was very disappointing for this to be happening with a service provider that we'd worked with for years. It was coupled with the fact that the unit was aging and they were having trouble sourcing parts, and we understand that is a challenge, but they were not communicating any of that until the very end. And in my greenness, I let that go on too long. And so it was also my fault that it went on this long and that I didn't reach out to another vendor earlier than that. It just seems strange that as soon as we mentioned bringing in a secondary service provider to address the issue, finally, that things miraculously appeared. Everything was repaired. Of course, replacement parts showed up and were installed. And within days of that, we created an RFP for the property, and we did not invite that vendor to participate. And that solved the issue after that.
Did you have a follow-up meeting with the vendor, like with feedback, and what did they you know, to ask.
We requested to discuss the issue, but they were just disinclined. I don't know if they'd lost interest in our property or if they were too busy. They wouldn't communicate that with us. And it just seemed a complete 180 from the service we'd been experiencing in the years past. I don't know if there was a change of leadership or management or staff. Even that wasn't communicated to us. So it just tells me communication is absolutely key. Everyone goes through issues. There's challenges on various properties, buildings with different units, things like that. Just communicate. Yeah. That was a good learning experience for me.
I think there's a, someone had a comment on the chat up to everybody that we might want to bring up. I don't know.
Yeah, it helps to familiarize yourself with the language in the contract with regards to what constitutes breach of contract. A formal notice in that regard often gets their attention. That's a great comment. Absolutely.
Very much so. Sadly, it wasn't enough to get their attention. We did provide multiple correspondence that advised, you know, this is the contract we have in place. There's the sections that refer to breach of contract. We need your attention on this. We need some communication on this item. It just didn't happen.
Okay. Paris, would you like to go over your scenario?
Certainly. So I'm Paris Cox with Kearney Real Estate. And the scenario I'm going to review with you guys or go over, share with you today was the roof repairs and multiple vendors. We had a situation, we've got a 4-building campus in San Diego County here that we had a roofing consultant out to evaluate the roofs and make suggested areas for repair. So we had a company, we'll call them Company A, out to make a whole slew of repairs at the property. Well, short time later, we had some pretty heavy rains and roof leaks were coming up. And our property administrator at the time had taken the call and decided she needed to get another or a roof vendor out there. But unfortunately, she didn't call the vendor who had just made the repairs. She called somebody else. So now they've gone out, they've made repairs. Neither the PM or the director of property management was kind of aware that she did this until the invoice shows up. Now suddenly we have an invoice, it's not budgeted, nobody really knows about it. And as we're digging in with her about what happened and when were these roof leaks, we find out that she called the other company, not even remembering that we'd already engaged another vendor who had essentially a 90-day warranty on the repairs. So now we're faced with needing to pay this bill, but more importantly, we need to contact the original vendor and engage them and make sure, was this something that they missed? Was this something that wasn't in the scope of work that was given to them by the consultant? You know, or these new repairs altogether? Maybe if it's something that they missed, should they be on the hook for paying the bill? You know, we had all these different questions. So we called Company A, the roofing vendor that did the original repairs, and spoke with them. And we're really honest with them and explained, listen, the admin had called somebody else to come in and do this. Shouldn't have done that. We're concerned about, you know, negating the warranty that we might have. But I have to say, being honest and upfront with them, that vendor was super responsive. They came out, I think it was like next day, if not same day, to see us. They were out at the property right away, investigating the repairs, making sure it wasn't something they had missed in the scope that they were given. But ultimately, what we found out is, you know, the roofs are older. They've got lots of seams and lots of issues, and it's something that should have been up, that is up for replacement down the line. But the Company A really went above and beyond, because not only did they come immediately and try to take responsibility for everything. They offered to reimburse us for the entire cost of the other bill. Well, we realized we had an internal issue, and that was that the admin had not communicated to the property manager or the director of property management, and probably should have never generated this bill in the first place. And because of that, we felt responsible and should at least share in the cost with the other company. And again, the other company continued, or company A, continued to go out and check the roofs and send crews and do additional work. And it's really because I think we have those close relationships and that we're open and we're honest with our vendors, that we can talk to them freely and we can resolve these issues quickly. You know, our BOMA vendors are really important, and we make mistakes, vendors can make mistakes, but if we can agree and meet on them and talk about them as professionals, these are things that we can resolve. I would say that the company A, they're a great vendor. In fact, they're on this call, so thank you, RSI Roofing. They do a fantastic job, but everybody should know, and I think you all do when you're in BOMA, that your BOMA vendors and our BOMA have so much knowledge, and it's just so important that you can reach out to them anytime. And that's been our experience in pretty much every, you know, in every vendor that we deal with, whether it's landscape, roofing, emergency, you know, emergency repairs, anything like that. So, you know, we've seen that come up. And I don't know if any of you have ever had issues with communicating with vendors. It sounds like Elizabeth did in her last scenario, but you know, those are things, those are learning lessons that we all make, and definitely keeping those communication lines open makes a big difference. I don't know if anybody else had any comments or questions, but.
We'd love to hear feedback, and if you would prefer, you can always send it to the chat as well, and we can read it for you.
I have a question for everybody on the line, if you don't mind. I'm curious, you know, with COVID and people coming back soon, hopefully, and during the whole lockdown, I'm curious to hear from people on the phone or on the video call that what has been your experience with working with service providers? Have you had any trouble with getting service providers out? You know, that were they properly in PPE when they came out? Has there been any problems with that? I'm just curious from a general standpoint of whatever service provider is responding for you during this time.
I haven't had any issues, and I even had water damage at one of my properties, and they were out there within a few hours. So everything, and I've got 8 different properties. So far, so good. I mean, hopefully I didn't jinx myself.
I was going to say the same thing, knock on wood. Any office staff reduction has been communicated from our service providers, but there has been, thankfully, no impact in the service provided so far. We've been very lucky.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like all of our service providers have been really responsive.
I did have a situation just today where we're looking to switch to an automatic door opener for COVID-19, and the less things that everybody, the traffic has to touch, the better. But our door company, they are pretty much bare minimum right now with their staff as well. So a large project right now, they're stating is going to have to postpone until everything is a little bit more back to normal, and they're fully staffed.
You know, the one thing I might add to my scenario, and maybe you all picked up on this, but it was really important too, I think, on the side of the landlord to be able to admit our mistake in making that phone call to the wrong vendor. And so again, I think when you have those open lines of communication with your vendors, when you can honestly admit maybe you've done something wrong, I think you might find a lot of times they're really willing to work with you and help you resolve the issues that maybe you've gotten yourself into. So keep that in mind. It's okay. We all make mistakes, and sometimes we just have to own up to them.
I've noticed that too, and a lot of the times it seems like they appreciate when you are able to say, like, look, this was on us, but what can we do now moving forward? And that kind of brings it into my scenario, where we had our building lobby door that wasn't operating properly, and I called the door company to troubleshoot and repair. The door company called me back after taking a look and said that it's not the mechanical operation of the door itself, but the door access equipment that is causing the issue. So the tech leaves, and I call our door access company to take a look at their equipment. A few hours pass. I check back up with them, and they're stating that their equipment is fine, and that it's the automatic door operator. And then their tech leaves. After multiple phone calls with each service provider, going back and forth, trying to figure out what's going on, I have both the vendors go on site, and they're able to work together to resolve the issue. And for me, it was pointing fingers never resolves anything, but coming together as a team produces solutions. And so sometimes problems are a little bit more complex than one service provider can provide. And sometimes you just need to get everybody together and be like, okay, we're a team. What can we do? We need to resolve this. And at the end of the day, it's really great to see them come together and fix the issue.
That's a really good point, Bree. When I first got into this industry, that was one of the first lessons I learned was that sometimes leaks can be related to rain and roofs, and sometimes they can be HVAC or plumbing. And when you can't really put your finger on the problem, it's a good idea to maybe call them both out at the same time and have everybody look, because you can save a lot of time and maybe even save some money if you can really pinpoint the problem. So yeah, I learned that lesson early on as well.
We've had a couple of instances where we've had to have two different vendors working together to address the situation. And when they can do that and it flows smoothly and the issues are resolved quickly, just the level of appreciation from property management is so high. And it really speaks to the level of service being provided by those vendors.
Has anyone ever had an experience where two vendors didn't get along, or competitors, didn't get along in a building and were doing the blame game or stuff like that? Anybody want to comment on that? I'm curious.
We had
Most
one
of the time I
situation
found
like
that other.
Sorry.
Sure.
It just became a finger pointing situation and the ultimate blame game. It was almost unbelievable. And it's confusing because we're relying on the information, on the expertise of these service providers, especially when it comes to something mechanical, like something in the HVAC system or alarm systems, things like that, of that nature. And just having them say, no, it's this other vendor's issue. They don't know what they're doing. They were actually bringing themselves down by playing that game and making us just doubt their commitment to the issue and to their client.
Yeah, in a perfect world, you'd want to get everyone around a big table and talk it out, right? But there's not always that time for that. It makes it challenging, I bet.
I think too, Barry, you know, when you can bring them all together and get them in one room, even though they might be pointing fingers, it's kind of hard to say, no, it's not my equipment, it's your equipment, when they're all standing there and they can prove to each other. So again, I think that just speaks to the importance of, when you can't pinpoint a problem, getting all those that might be involved together. And that includes the property manager, the assistant property manager being there too, because it's a learning lesson for you. It's a learning lesson about the mechanical of your building or how it operates. And you can kind of see when it's going south and the finger pointing is starting, and hopefully you can stop it in its place, you know, and get them to be professionals and handle it in a proper manner.
Yeah, isn't that true? Like emails and texts, I mean, things can ramp up so quickly, right? And then when you're face to face, it solves so many problems because you're getting all the details and the nonverbal, right?
True, and for the most part, it seems like service providers do want to find a solution. They want to continue to do business with you, and it might not be that they're like purposely pointing fingers. In my case, it was both parts, so they were both right, but they needed each other to come together, because they're also like, well, that's not my equipment, so I don't want to touch it. So having both of them together, they were able to work together and resolve any issues. So I know HVAC and the EMS system seems to be another one where sometimes it just takes getting the two vendors together. And what's great though too is if you have that great relationship with your vendors, then they also know each other and know who you work with. And so they're a little bit more comfortable to work with each other and reach out and resolve issues in a timely manner.
Yeah, building those relationships really helps, right? I mean, I've had property managers invite me as speaking as a vendor, service partner. You know, I've had property managers kind of get a bunch of service partners together to just create that bond. So they're a team, they're a whole team on the building, the service providers, you know, even though me and, you know, an elevator guy, we got to get along, you know, and if we have a good rapport, that can solve a lot of problems when you need it to, right?
I agree, and that lends to having those good service providers and the relationships, because we all want to, as Bree said, solve the problems, and you know, we should be willing to get together to help do that.
I want to kind of open this up right now to everybody who's in the Zoom meeting. If you guys have any experiences solving problems with service providers that you want to share, any solutions that you found really helpful.
We have a lot of shy phone callers today. Come on, shy people. Speak up.
I know that Elizabeth had another situation, which I found very, very interesting, kind of blown away because I've never experienced this before, but it was great to see how she handled it, and a good takeaway overall was in regards to a security issue. Elizabeth, do you want to share?
That actually wasn't my issue. It was shared from another property manager about a security guard who was caught sleeping. I'd invite the person that it actually happened to chime in if they want. because they have more detail. Anne?
We should have had this.
Yeah,
We should have had
it's
this-
my property. I was, we had been having a lot of issues with this specific security company. And one day I was taking out our new assistant on a tour of the properties and pulled up to this one retail center, was getting ready to get out of the car. And I was like, well, where's the guard? So we got out, knocked on the door, and he was there, no joke, just relaxing, laying there, playing games on his video things. And then the next time, 2 weeks later, went there, same guy, found him sleeping in the same room. And he wasn't even on break. So he was gone. Yeah. Then the same company at another property, the guard was caught sitting in one of the restaurants talking to employees. So we got rid of her too. So
When you say you got rid of them, what process did you have to follow in order to do that? Because I assume you had to document the heck out of the situation.
oh, yeah, we had been documenting all of these issues for months and months. When something would happen, I would call the supervisor. We would also email the supervisor. That way we had everything documented. They would respond back with, going to talk to the person. A few times we got rid of the guards immediately and replaced, and the replacements weren't any better. But this went on for probably 5 months between 3 properties. And then finally we were like, sorry. I mean, we let them, when we did the RFP, we let them bid for it, but yeah, they didn't get it. And we're in a much better place now.
Looking back at the scenarios that I had submitted, I realized that I did have a security officer one that was mine. We had a Class A high-rise in Mission Valley, and our security service had started installing these scan points around the property so that the security officers could walk the various areas and provide photo evidence that scanning and patrolling, and they were alternating their patrols in order to catch any suspicious activity and just document things on the property better. One security officer thought they could outsmart the system by falsifying their reports by staging photos. But they didn't realize that everything had a time and a date stamp, and there was, other mechanics in the back end coding for each of these scan points. We'd caught on to it after reports from various tenants that this person was off doing something they weren't supposed to, this officer who was on duty. And we alerted their supervisor and documented all of this, and each report from tenants of any oddball activity. We reported it to their supervisor, and their supervisor began making surprise visits to the property, which worked out really well because eventually the security officer was caught asleep on the roof of the fitness center. And were subsequently, I believe they may have been reassigned, but within a week they quit. It just wasn't for them, apparently. But being able to work with that security supervisor and having all that documentation of various incidents with that officer really put that in motion and made it so it was a very smooth transition to get that person off the property and get someone in who wanted to work and who cared about their level of service.
Yeah, Elizabeth, Sonia made a comment too about usually all you have to do is contact your security provider and ask the guard be removed. We've seen that a lot not everybody really cares about their job, and although the company might be really good and the upper management might be fantastic, sometimes the security guard job can be a little thankless and maybe boring, and the guards are just there kind of being a warm body. And you should never be afraid to have somebody removed and bring somebody in. I mean, I've had properties where transient populations were a really big problem, and some of my guards just didn't get it. And unfortunately, you just have to keep switching them out and switching them out until you get that one that works. So you don't want to spin your wheels too long trying to hope they're going to get it right when you've got a whole property to take care of and tenants, and you could suffer vandalism or damage or break-ins, what have you.
The documentation was more of a requirement of our client, who was also a tenant on the premises, and they were high profile. So the security process to get an officer approved and then trained on the property was somewhat extensive.
Yeah, I can.
But there was one instance that we did have a guard removed immediately because they were actually following me. Just generally being creepy. But we did have them removed in that instance.
It's nice when you do have a security system also that you utilize that. So if you've got camera footage and you can go back and look at it, for example, when your guard's asleep, or if maybe you have a guard that's stealing from tenant spaces, you'd be surprised what you can catch on camera if you've got enough camera angles and stuff like that. So being able to use your resources that you have can help you put together a lot of that documentation.
That is a good point, though. Going just above and reaching out to either the service providers like upper management or even sometimes the owners, because I know we have some, like, at least I work with some smaller companies, but just having that communication with them and letting them know, like, hey, we're experiencing some problems, and typically seems like they'll address it with their employees and can, at least it gives the company like a chance to make it right or to fix it.
I'm curious to know everybody's magic number. How many chances do you give a service provider when they screw up or don't do something right? What's your number? Everybody's got different numbers.
It all depends on what they did wrong. I mean, when it came to security, I gave them months and months because they were doing great on one of my other properties. Couldn't figure out what the deal was with these other three. But then there was this other company that they started a job with us and stopped, after one day and said, oh, I'm sorry, we have other jobs to do. We can't finish this. You'll need to find somebody else. I've never used them again.
Yeah, Barry, I would say that it really could come down maybe to how big of the mistake or problem they caused is, or did they really work hard to fix it? So, second chances, I think people deserve them, but I think it's case by case, Responsiveness is really important. I think we as property managers, we reach out to our vendors, and if we don't hear something back, we're all really busy. We're all going in 100 directions all day long. And sometimes you might send out an email and then you get busy on something else and you haven't heard back. And so now you're having to follow up, and that takes a lot of time. So being responsive, I think, is really important, but that goes for us as well, being able to get back to them so that they can keep moving or get the job going and get the crew scheduled. And, there's a lot of moving parts on everybody's side. So.
Thank you. Oh, we have a chat. Someone, what did they say?
We have a comment from Alina.
Hi, Lena. Bree, do you want to read that? Well, I think everybody sees
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think everyone.
Agreed with Paris. People make mistakes, and how they handle fixing that mistake tells you a lot about whether you can continue to work with them, the vendor. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It seems like it's always case by case. It's not a certain, like, okay, like they did it 3 times. It seems like if that vendor is willing to work with you, and like Per said, if they're communicating with you, no matter the mistakes that are being made, if you're able to work with each other and continue to fix them as they arise, because it seems like that's property management for you. It's just problem solving all day long. Awesome. Okay, well, we have just a few more minutes left. Here we go. One more thing from the chat. Also important to give the company a chance to correct the problem, possibly remove a site supervisor who is not performing, and they can replace with a better person or contact. And another comment, I agree, everyone makes mistakes, but communication is definitely key on both ends, and hopefully you can work together before deciding to go with another vendor, but definitely case by case. Definitely, it seems like sometimes for us as property managers, just replacing them with a different vendor isn't always the best solution, because of the work that it takes to go and bid it out, or even if you're experiencing a problem with one vendor, the likelihood of another company having the same problem could be there as well. So definitely trying to work it out first, and communicating, and going through the process of okay, can we solve this together? Okay. Well, if we don't have any other scenarios or comments, we'll go ahead and wrap us up.
Thanks. Just wanted to thank Melanie Bomba from RSI Roofing for sponsoring today's event. They've always been such a huge BOMA supporter in many ways, and we really appreciate you doing that, Melanie. And thanks for everybody for being on the call. Thank you for the great panelists we had today, Elizabeth and everybody. You know, we got Elizabeth, we got Paris, and Bree, of course, for hosting and being a panelist. So really a reminder that, you know, you're going to get a little email with a link